having read the text, in your bulletin there's a map. There's two ways you can deal with sermon today. You can just look at the map, and every time I say a name, you can find it on the map, and that'll really help you understand where the Japhethites went, where the Shemites went, and where the Hamites went. Or you can follow the text in the bulletin, or you can do both. But you have a map, and that shows the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Let's get on with our sermon. The text for this morning, Genesis 10, verses 1 to 32, entitled, How Noah's Prophecy Was Fulfilled. In our last text, we read of Noah's prophecy about his three sons. Due to Ham's sin, his son Canaan would become the father of the ungodly Canaanites, who of course would all oppose Israel. They would also be servants to both Shem and Japheth. Shem would be blessed by becoming the chosen race of God during the Old Testament. To them would be the promise, beginning with Abraham until the coming of Jesus Christ. Yet Noah's prophecy also predicted that they would forsake their faith, and the Gentile line of Japheth would continue in the faith the Jews rejected. Japheth's line are the European Gentiles, who would immediately receive large portions of land, but be largely godless. The blessing of Noah to Japheth would not until another 4,000 years later, when the gospel would depart from the line of Shem and be received by the Gentiles after Pentecost. We have 3 points to our message this morning. Does everybody have a map? You have a map? Everybody has? Okay. First point, verses 1 to 5. What nations came from the blessed line of Japheth? Secondly, verses 6 to 20. What nations came from the cursed line of Ham? And verses 21 to 32. What nations came from the blessed line of Japheth? Context. Genealogies have multiple purposes for being included in the Bible. For instance, this genealogy is much more than just the factual listing of the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This genealogy was first written to show what lands the sons of Noah and their children would come to inhabit. Now, secular historians, they have cavemen and all kinds of nonsense. They don't have a law coming from where the Noah's ark landed, so they get everything wrong. Secular history has rejected this biblical account of how the nation spread out. So this genealogy is great for us because this chapter is a permanent record, so Christians will always know the exact truth as to how the nation spread out from the days of Noah and what countries they went to and what lines of Noah went exactly where. Because of this genealogy, it's undisputed. More importantly, this genealogy is written to explain Noah's prophecy about the lines of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which we read in the previous chapter, verses 24 and 27, and to show exactly how that prophecy was fulfilled. The separating of nations, you'll remember, came directly after the confusing of languages at the Tower of Babel. We come to our first point, verses 1 to 5. What nations came from the blessed line of Japheth? Verses 1 and 2. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, unto whom sons were born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, we're going to start with Japheth, were Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tyrus. The study of each of Noah's three sons, in all three of these genealogies, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, will always begin with a list first of Noah's children, then move to his grandchildren, and then finally move to his great-grandchildren. Japheth's line first came to occupy Asia Minor, which is where the ark came to land. After the Japhethites left Babel, because remember, everybody was at Babel at one point. After they left Babel, they spread to all of Europe and eventually to northern Asia. That's where we find the Japhethites. Japhethite's eldest son, Gomer, took his family and moved to the upper part of Asia Minor, Ezekiel 38:6. And then Thracia. The area Thracia that Thrace comprises today are southeastern Bulgaria, which we would have called northern Thrace back then, northeastern Greece, western Thrace, and the European part of Turkey, eastern Thrace. Japheth's second son, Magog, became the father of the Scythians, Ezekiel 38:2 and 15. The Scythians migrated westward from Central Asia to southern Russia and became modern Ukraine. The third son, Madai, settled in Macedonia and became those called the Medes, 2 Kings 17:6, Isaiah 13:17, Jeremiah 25:25. The Medes settled in northern Iran. From Japheth's fourth son, Javan, came the Greeks. Isaiah 66:19, Ezekiel 27:13 and 19. Fifth son, Tubal, was the father of the Iberi. Ezekiel 27:3, 32 and 36, which became, as you know, the Iberian Peninsula, consisting of Portugal and Spain. Sixth son, Meshech, became the father of the Cappadocias, which is inhabited by modern-day Turkey. Finally, seventh son, Tiras, becomes the father of the Etruscans, which occupy what is today Italy. Now, we know a lot has moved around since then, but that's where they settled. So we see that Japheth's children filled the lands of modern-day Europe and Asia Minor. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. Here we have the great-grandchildren of Noah. Gomer was the eldest son of Japheth and had 3 children. Ashkenaz settled in Pontus and Bithynia in what is modern-day Turkey. The famous lake today called Askinu and the sea called Axenus comes directly from his name, still today. Riphath is called Diphath in 1 Chronicles 1:6 and settled in Pithmathiah, which is the modern-day Turkey and Greece. Togarmah's people split. Some moved to Gaul, or what we call Germany. Galatians was written to Gaul. Some moved to Armenia and became the Turks. So Gomer's children remained in Asia Minor, but some moved north towards modern-day Germany. Also the sons of Javan, Elishish, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Javan was the fourth son of Japheth, and here we read of Japheth's grandchildren. Elisha became the father of the Grecians. Tarshish became the father of the Cilicians, which is the city of Tarshish, Ezekiel 27:12. The Mediterranean Sea was once called the Tarshish Sea. Kittim's descendants settled in Italy, and the Italians came from the Grecians. Dodanim is associated with the Greek island of Rhodes. So we see that Javan settled in Greece, and his children remained in Greece and moved down towards Italy. Verse 5, of these, all what we just mentioned, were the isles of the Gentiles, divided in their lands, every man after his tongue, and after their families in their nation. Now the word isles does not mean that the Gentiles lived only on isles. Isles in this context refers to all countries that had to cross a sea from leaving Judea to the place that they settled. So anybody who crossed the sea was said to go to the isles. The line of Japheth came to speak its own unique language, as you know, after they departed from Babel. As we can see, Japheth became the father of the European nations. To summarize, the 7 Japhetic nations are 1. Gomer, who occupied Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. 2. Magog, the Russians. 3. Media, became Upper Asia Minor, northern Iran. Javan, which is the Hebrew name for Greeks, settled in Greece. Tubal, who founded Portugal and Spain. Meshech, who became the Slavs, who live in modern-day Turkey. And Tiras, the Etruscans, who live in Italy. That is the line of Japheth. That is where the line of Japheth went. Now we move to our second point, our second line, which is the line of Ham. Verses 6 to 20. What nations came from the cursed line of Ham? We should expect to see nations that are enemies of the gospel. Verse 6. Moreover, the sons of Ham were Cush and Mizraim and Put and Canaan. After the line of Ham left Babel, they went to both southern Asia and Africa. 1 Chronicles 4:40, Psalm 105:27. Ham had 4 children, we're told, Cush and Mizraim and Put and Canaan. Now the text traced just how Noah's prophecy that the line of Ham would be cursed developed. Ham's oldest son Cush was father both of the Ethiopians and Arabians. Genesis 2:13, 2 Kings 19:9, Job 28:19, Jeremiah 13:23, Jeremiah 46:9. Ham's second son Mizraim was the father of the Egyptians, who would enslave the line of Shem for hundreds of years in Egypt. From Ham's third son Phut sprung the Libyans, among whom is the Moors or Muslims. Jeremiah 46:9, Ezekiel 27:10, Ezekiel 30 verse 5, and Nahum chapter 3 verse 9. Canaan, that fourth son, was the cursed parent of that cursed race, came to be called the Canaanites. Mentioned 150 times in Scripture. The term Canaanites is used to refer to all the inhabitants of the land, including the Hivites, Girgashites, Jebusites, Amorites, Hittites, and Perizzites. So we see that from the very beginning of the curse that Ham's line will produce some of the greatest enemies of Israel, including Arabians, Egyptians, Canaanites, Assyrians, Philistines, Hittites, and others. Their curse would be to oppose the gospel when it was in the hands of Shem, and later when it's in the hands of Japheth. They show themselves to be cursed due to their continual opposition of the gospel. Verse 7. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Septica. Also the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Here we have the line of Ham's eldest son, Cush. His first son, Seba, was the father of the Sabaeans who lived in the Arabian desert. Psalm 72:10, Isaiah 43:3. Second son of Cush, Havilah, mentioned in Genesis 2:11, settled in the eastern part of Arabia, a desert near Egypt. Genesis 25:18, 1 Samuel 15:7. Third son, Sabta, was the father of those people who lived in the lower part of Arabia and later lived in Persia. Ramah and Septica, from whom descended another people dwelling in the same Arabia, Ezekiel 27:22. Sheba was the father of those which inhabited Ethiopia, 1 Kings 10:1, 10:4, and 27:22, Matthew 12:42, Acts 8:27. Dedan also settled in Ethiopia, Ezekiel 27:15 and 38:13. So we see Cush's son occupied Arabia and began moving toward Africa, the son of Ham. Verse 8 and 9. And Cush begat Nimrod, who began to be mighty in the earth. And he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. Here we have some commentary, strange commentary about one person in the genealogy above all, but we'll see why. Cush gave birth to Nimrod, who was the world's first tyrant. He was a great hunter, first of wild animals, we're told. While destroying many wild beasts, he earned a fierce reputation among men. He grew in confidence and sought to use his reputation to gather great companies of the youngest and strongest men together to himself. By their help, he established a tyranny and absolute power over men. He refused the teachings of Noah and flaunted his ambition before God, having no fear of God. His reputation for cruelty became a saying, here repeated, as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. Verses 10 to 12. And the beginning of his kingdom, that is Nimrod's kingdom, was Babel. That's why he's mentioned. He'll be the guy who starts Babel. And Erech and Akkad and Calneh and the land of Shinar. From that land he went forth into Assyria and built Nineveh and Rehoboth, Ir and Calah. Rezin also between Nineveh and Calah. This is a great city. So Nimrod is specifically mentioned because he founded the city of Babel. Nimrod orchestrated the building of the city until it was stopped by God when he confused their languages. That's when we see the actual separation of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's our text next week, by the way. We'll see more about that. Nimrod's other great cities are also listed near Babel, such as Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. We are told that these cities were in Sinai or Mesopotamia. From there, Nimrod went further and built the city of Assyria, a future great enemy of Israel and the line of Shem. Verse 13. This is more in the descendants of Ham. And Mizraim begot Ludim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Naphtahim. Mizraim and his 4 sons founded several nations dwelling in Africa, springing from the Egyptians, which as they multiplied went further and further westward and southward from Egypt. So they were Egyptians. Verse 4. Pathrasim also, and Chalsalim, out of whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorims. So from Pathrasim all the way to Casluhim came the race of Pathros. This eventually became known, we're told, as the Philistines. Isaiah 11:11, Jeremiah 44:1 and 15, and Jeremiah 29:14. You see, all these enemies of Ham are those who would oppose the gospel. 15 to 20, we get to the 4th son of Ham. Also Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and Jebusites, and Amorite, and Girgasite, and Hivite, and Archite, and Sinite, and Arvadite, and Zemarite, and Hamathite, and afterwards were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. Then the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Azza, and as thou goest unto Sodom, and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, even unto Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, according to their families, according to their tongues and their countries, and in their nation. So here we come to the 4th son of Ham, Canaan, one specifically named in the curse. Remember, he didn't say cursed be Ham, he said cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham. Sidon was his firstborn, we're told, the father of the people and builder of the city of Sidon, Joshua 11:8, 19 28, interestingly, Sidon is generally combined with Tyre and Sidon. And when Jesus pronounced judgment on Chorazin and Bethsaida, he suggested that if the pagan cities of Tyre and Sidon had experienced what Chorazin and Bethsaida did, they would have long ago repented in sackcloth and ashes. Matthew 11, 21 to 24, so we learned that the city was wicked. From Canaan's second son, Heth, came the Hittites, Joshua 1, 4, 9, 1. Eventually the other descendants founded other wicked cities, especially Sodom and Gomorrah, founded by descendants of Ham. This ends, and Gaza, which is the capital of the Philistines. This ends the list of all the Ham's line and Shem's greatest enemies. So we see in Ham all the enemies of Israel, which included the Arabians, the Egyptians, the Canaanites, Assyrians, Philistines, Hittites, as well as many other wicked cities, such as Babel, Sodom, and Gomorrah. All came from the line of Ham. Now we come to our third line, which is the line of Shem. Verses 21 to 23, and we learn what nations came from the blessed line of Shem. Verse 21. Unto Shem also, the father of all the sons of Eber, and the elder brother of Japheth, were children born. As we begin to look at the generation of Shem, through whom would come the Messiah, we begin with the first name Eber. Shem had other children, but Eber is mentioned because from Eber will begin the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and eventually Christ. Japheth alone is here mentioned as a brother to Shem, you'll notice, and not Ham, because Ham was deservedly shut out from Shem's blessing pronounced by Noah and was cursed by God, whereas Japheth will be a partaker of Shem's religion, both in his good deeds done to his father and the blessing that followed the covering of Noah's sin. We notice here also in the text that Japheth was actually the oldest, Shem the second, and Ham the third. But Shem is usually mentioned first because he will be the first leader of the church. Verses 22 to 25. We're still in the line of Shem. The sons of Shem were Elam and Asher and Arpachshad and Lud and Aram. And the sons of Aram, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash. Also Arpachshad begat Shala, and Shala begat Eber. Unto Eber also were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Shem had 7 sons, we're told. Actually, that should be 5. 2 of the last sons are from Eber. He had 5 sons. Elam, the firstborn of Shem, became the Persians. Genesis 14:9, Isaiah 21:2, and elsewhere. Asher, second-born, was father of the Assyrians. Genesis 10:11. Third son, Arphaxad, was the father of the Chaldeans. Fourth son, Lud, was the father of the Lydians in Asia. Aram, the fifth son, was the father of the Syrians. These 2 other sons, or grandchildren of Shem, are mentioned, Peleg and Joktan. We learn that it was in the days of Peleg and Joktan that the earth was divided. It was divided in 2 senses of the word. It was first divided by language, as each of the 3 sons of Noah came to have their own unique language, and thus they were separated by language. The second was that they came to be separated by physical national borders. Unable to communicate with each other, they spread out and separated themselves by border and language. And that happens, we're told, in the days of Peleg. Verses 26 to 30. Then Joktan begot Almadad, we're still in the line of Shem, and Sheloth and Hasbaroth and Jerah. Joktan's sons here, of course, are mentioned, who many think spread out west towards India, onward. And Hadaram and Uzal and Diklah and Obal and Abimal and Sheba and Ophir and Havilah and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as they goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. I will only mention that many of these names, such as Mesha and Sephar, are found in Arabia, where there is a port named after Mesha. There's a royal city named Saphar, as well as a mountain range. Here mentioned is a mount of the east. So the location of most was in Arabia, near India. 31. These are the sons of Shem, according to their families and according to their tongues and their countries and nations. So the portion of the earth occupied by the descendants of Shem begins at its southwestern extremity with Lydia and includes Syria, Chaldea, parts of Assyria, Persia, and the Arabian Peninsula. Modern scholars have given the name of Semitic or Shemitic to the language spoken by his descendants. And now our summary here in verse 32. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generation among their people, and out of these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. The primary purpose of this genealogy was to show how each of these genealogies fulfilled the prophecy of Noah. Japheth would become heathen and Gentile. They would be blessed with land and the largest population of all the races. However, they would be largely excluded from any spiritual blessings for 4,000 years until the days after Pentecost. The cursed race of Ham would give birth to multiple nations that would all war against Israel and the church. The race of Shem would begin with the calling of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They would be entrusted with the gospel until the days of Christ. They would also lose their inheritance as the Gentiles, the Japhethites, would be grafted in where the Jews, the Shemites, fell away. And this is why Genesis 9, we looked at last time we were together, states that Japheth would dwell in the tents of Shem. He'd take his religion. Shem receives the most immediate blessing by being in the line of Christ, but Japheth would receive the blessing of having the greatest number of land, people, and subsequently Christians. Hamite, of course, remain a curse even today against the church. Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, may we be taught and not deceived by the myths of how man came either from animals or even the myths of how man came to evolve in certain continents. For we do see most clearly that 8 people were on the ark and 8 people came out of the ark. And we see very clearly by the Word of God where exactly the names of the sons and where exactly they went to inhabit and what races and cultures and nations today and languages came from which of the 3 sons of Noah. We pray that we might always see and hear information in the light of thy holy word. We do pray these things in thy Son's name. Amen. Conclude our worship today with the singing of Psalm again 35. We'll sing the last few verses, verses 24 to 28, to the tune of Jackson. David, of course, has been lamenting and asked God to help him against the enemies of Saul. Of course, we know that he did, that Saul repented, and that eventually Saul and his own son Jonathan were killed in a battle, and David became king as God had predicted. But David here in the end, in verses 24 to 28, he's talking to God and he says, it would be wonderful if you delivered me, because the whole church and those who are godly are all watching. And it would be a great example to the godly to resist the ungodly if they could see how you deliver me from the ungodly. So the tune of Jackson, verses 24 to 28, Psalm 35. O Lord my God, do thou me judge after thy righteousness, and let them not their joy against me triumphantly express, nor let them say within their hearts, ah, we would have it thus, nor suffer them to say that he is swallowed up by us. Shame and confounded be they all that at my word are glad. Let those against me that do boast with shame and scorn be glad. Let them that love my righteous cause be glad, shall then not cease to say, the Lord being magnified, who loves his servants' peace. Thy righteousness shall also be declared by my tongue, the praises that belong to thee speak shall it all day long. Now our Lord Jesus Christ himself and God, even our Father, which hath loved us and has given us everlasting consolation and good hope through grace, comfort your hearts and establish you in every good word and work. Amen. Never said.
That was lame.
What's that?
That.
Yeah, that was really fantastic.
the word black though.
No, you didn't.
You can't ever say the word black. Huh? That's right.
Yeah.
You got the Egyptians. I mean, you got. I will